Good afternoon, Star Children. Here I am coming at you from my bunker on the border of Queens and Brooklyn. I've been asked to provide some content, so I'm going to do an impromptu reading. I'll be reading 3 new poems, and in accordance with those, I've got a theme for today. It's provided by a good friend of mine, Walter Sipser, an artist. And I know that's a nice little reflection. Adventure found him and found him often. Today's theme. This is called Omission. So many strange hours teased out in bafflement. Because he's asked, I tell him to leave the heart be. Rip your throat out, I tell him. Hush up and assess. Then you do. Then you speak. My Uncle Don's bookie arrived at his bowling alley almost every day for decades, taking wagers for tracks all over the country. One day, Aunt Rose tells him, enough, she'll leave him. No surprise, he said to me years later, over all that time, he broke even. In democratic circles, as ever in loves, the power of the veto is meant to befuddle before it can find compromise. So the bourbon gets capped, ending any more serious discussion about cruelties neither he nor she is ever ready to hear or say. I've turned over Don's assessment in my head for years, and now here I am, a friend asked for quiet counsel among the oddities laid bare round the house. 2 eyes, I'm told, trained on is. The emptied outsides of closets, the absence of any one thing once mesh and mutual, moments at the foot of the stairs, poised to call up. Even what's left of the stuff in the medicine cabinet. He chuckles, placing the bottle back up in the cupboard. This was getting dangerous. I'd argue not was, but his very is, if daylight has anything to do with it. Coming forthwith, and so bluntly it crowds the kitchen, and thus the plot. His whole being is afoot. Even birdsong is eerie. So too, the kitchen is blood-run quiet and warming kettle, and dawn, coming in, is too bright and unsettled in daylight's is. The quiet is throb, and wind is in a tree, like just before fission is tremendous, and detonation is detonation. That very last primal second, before no one is, miles under the target. This is called 80. He's the tight-lipped one among the pressed rabble of wife and kids. The grandkids, some in-laws, his compeer, the cousin Vince with the gimpy hip, all equally impatient, touching on their 3rd and 4th goodbyes just this side of the restaurant's terrace, already clogging the sidewalk. Looking quite good, too. Trim with a minor stoop, no one bothers noticing. Not that they would. The lambent silver balloons tethered to his cart, the glinting curlicue of the 8, the bright gape of the 0, each drifting in a slight petulance to the south, exact him. One day, my old friend Ray hit a big one out at Northfield. He was 80. Came home and got the escarole, tomatoes, and onion together. Came home and got the escarole, tomatoes, and onion together, and tossed with salt, pepper, oil, and vinegar. Years later, as his son wiped the phlegm and bits of food from his bib, I imagine anything Ray's eyes laid sight to engrossed him like bone and fire, a flare and spit like shapeless and therefore spirited gods in waiting. Now look at all this ungodly shit piled in his cart, Ray. One after another, the presents came at him dutifully through the shrimp cocktails, and through the main a volley of toasts, family stories, family fibs, and talk of cronies lost or currently losing. Other than a shared intuition, 60-plus years of marriage also includes chiding kicks from his aunt under the table, reminding him to mind himself. Let it happen. One Mets game can wait. Smile, for Christ's sake. Of course he knows why. It's the care that comes or doesn't come that concerns us all. Why say another word ever? This last one is part of a series I'm working on. It's called Berlin. The Correspondent's phone blows up, November 9th. Sides lose. Betting sides, intuitive sides. Marriages end, elections are lost. Everyone in this equatorial world one day wakes up holding themselves losers. The sun slowly mounts the morning sky, lighting up the doorway you'll walk through for coffee and a cigarette in the kitchen, where, sitting with Karsten the night before, talk turned on the changing grace of bars, neighborhoods, all the youthful indulgences and stardom tapped out. Decadence is staying drunk well into your 40s, up late most nights, sitting bullshitting in a dim kitchen, and feeling thrown away by everything you should have known 20 years before. You can't despise the sun when it culminates in wind-blown autumn leaves and is swallowed up like a living ghost in clouds. It's only reminding you to go back to Reichenbergerstrasse to relight the candle. The two best things to shoot on video are cops and assholes. Sometimes sides don't lose, they collapse. And you can't tell the difference between the two anymore. You know how you're one of the keenest people around when you shut up and don't have to go out of your way to prove it? Perhaps this is what empathy truly is. There's no urgency in much of anything, especially in writing. You can do it anywhere, which isn't necessary or unnecessary. Nor is it any guarantee for good or even great work. Balance purpose with action, it's a living. You don't care for overly ambitious people, those who always compete. But this makes you feel urgent. Competitive, overly ambitious people comprise too many telegenic assholes walking the earth. And people like you give them an advantage they use to win over crowds and sunder the already weak or careless with something that irreconcilably rhymes with orange. Ciao.